My name is Caroline and I am 32 years old. That evening, during what seemed like a normal family dinner, my parents suddenly placed a set of keys on the table and said, "Madeline will stay at your apartment for now, she needs a place to rely on." I looked at them, then gave a faint smile. Funny. I haven't lived there for 6 weeks. My mother dropped her fork, my father glared, and my sister's face went pale. They had no idea I had prepared a secret none of them could have imagined. Have you ever been dismissed by your family to the point where they decided everything for you? If it were you, would you stay silent and endure or stand up for yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments, hit like and subscribe to the channel to continue this journey with me. Because what I'm about to tell you will change everything. I was born in Springfield, Illinois, into a middle-class family. From the outside, our house always looked like a postcard. A white picket fence, a neatly trimmed lawn, my mother in a striped dress waving at neighbors from the porch, my father driving his old sedan to work every day. But inside, things weren't so simple. I grew up always feeling like I was standing outside the spotlight. My younger sister, Madeline, for years younger than me, was the center of everyone's attention. Since she was little, she was called Little Angel, Baby, Princess. And me, the oldest daughter, was always labeled mature, responsible. Adults thought it was a compliment, but to me it felt like a sentence that forced me to sacrifice, to yield, and to figure things out alone. Even occasions that should have been mine were forgotten. I remember my 16th birthday. Throughout that spring, I had hinted many times that I only wanted a small party with a few friends at the pizza place near school. But on that day when I came home, everyone was busy. My mother drove Madeline to her ballet recital, my father was stuck at the office. I ordered a small pizza, sat alone in the dark room, chewing while staring at brochures for colleges. No cake, no friends, not even a happy birthday. I told myself it didn't matter, but the truth was, my heart carried a wound that never really healed. 5 years later, when Madeline turned 16, I saw what real contrast looked like. My parents rented a huge hall downtown, decorated it with balloons and twinkling lights. They even hired a DJ, inviting nearly her entire class. That night, I stood in the corner watching her in a pink dress, glowing like a fairy tale princess. When my parents pulled off the red cloth to reveal a polished old car with a giant bow on top, the whole hall cheered. I clapped too, but inside I was hollow. The memory of that cold pizza returned, reminding me that I had never been important enough to be remembered. Similar memories repeated in cycles. When I won a debate competition, I came home proudly with my medal, but my mother only asked, "Did your sister eat enough today?" I was inducted into the National Honor Society, but during the ceremony, my parents focused on taking pictures of Madeline in the audience instead of looking at the stage. The peak was my high school graduation. I was honored as salutatorian and stepped up to give my speech. I looked down, hoping to catch my parents' warm eyes. Instead, all I saw was my mother holding her camera, snapping pictures of Madeline, while my father adjusted the light so she could get better shots. I once asked my mother why she never came to watch my debates. She smiled, brushed my hair, and said, "Honey, I know you can handle yourself. But your sister is fragile, she needs me more." It sounded like praise, but I knew it was just an excuse to dismiss my needs. Strong became the label both parents hung on me, so they could safely pour all their attention on my sister. My father said less, but his actions spoke clearly. Whenever Madeline struggled at school, he immediately found her a tutor, paid for extra classes, even drove hours to bring her to tournaments. But whenever I needed something, his answer was always, "You're smart, you'll figure it out. I believe in you." I didn't always want to figure it out. I longed for someone to stand behind me, ready to catch me if I fell. But in that family, I had to catch myself. There were nights when I lay in my room, overhearing their whispers downstairs. "Madeline is still young, she needs more care." My mother's voice. "The older one knows how to take care of herself. She'll be fine." My father's reply. Over time, I learned to hide the hurt. When Madeline was praised, I smiled and clapped too. When my parents forgot my day, I pretended not to care. I thought that if I was good enough, patient enough, one day their eyes would rest on me. But that waiting only deepened my disappointment. The day I stepped onto the graduation stage, the spotlight made the auditorium clear. The spotlight made the auditorium clear. Amidst the roaring applause, I still longed for recognition from the people closest to me. But they weren't looking. They were too busy photographing their little princess. That moment carved into my heart a scar that never faded. I still remember the first days stepping into Northwestern's campus. Everyone was excited, talking about their future plans, while I wrestled with a very practical question: how to pay tuition. My parents contributed a few $100s each term, barely enough for books, let alone tuition. I didn't blame them immediately, but inside, the ground beneath me felt shaky. I knew I would have to manage on my own, and I did. Every morning, I got up at 5:30, put on the cafe uniform, and served coffee on campus. I learned to smile at customers even when my eyes ached from lack of sleep. After the morning shift, I rushed to class, eating a dry sandwich from the vending machine. In the afternoon, I spent hours in the library, both assisting the librarian and catching up on readings. On weekends, I worked as a waitress at an Italian restaurant downtown. The manager was tough, the customers sometimes rude, but the tips kept me afloat. I worked like that for 4 years. Sometimes I was so exhausted that I fell asleep the moment I sat down in class. Some days my hands shook carrying trays. My classmates asked, "Are you okay, Caroline?" I forced a smile. "I'm fine. I'm used to it." Meanwhile, my sister enjoyed her college life at the University of Michigan. My parents rented her a private apartment near campus, gave her a car for convenience. When she struggled in math, my father hired a tutor. When she wanted to join the art club, my mother happily bought her supplies. She graduated without a single dollar of student debt. Every time I called home, I heard the same comparisons. "Your sister is doing an amazing art project." My mother said proudly, "We think she has real talent." I knew if I mentioned my exhaustion, the reply would be the same. "You're strong, you'll be fine." One time I slipped. "I've been working 3 jobs to pay for school. I'm exhausted." My father went quiet for a few seconds, then answered, "You're doing great. That's just who you are." Instead of comforting me, his words made my chest heavy. To them, my endurance was a given, a default they could rely on so they didn't have to worry. So I kept going. I chose digital communications as my major, believing it could open a door out of the old cycle. I studied hard, joined internships, and started freelancing for small businesses, managing their social media and creating content. I didn't have time to party like my peers, but every small contract signed brought me closer to my goal: independence. Those years taught me more than any classroom. I learned how to count every dollar, how to endure complaints from clients, how to smile even when drained. I learned to rise again after being underestimated or rejected. One professor asked me once, "How do you manage both school and so many jobs?" I smiled and answered simply, "I don't have another choice." After 6 years of perseverance, 4 years of college, and 2 years of working to pay off my student debt, I finally had something I once thought was out of reach: a small apartment in Chicago. The apartment was about 900 square feet with old wooden floors and brick walls marked with scratches, but to me it was my greatest achievement. I remember the day I signed the purchase contract, my hand trembling as I held the pen. I looked around the empty apartment, morning light pouring through the large window, and tears rolled down my face. Every item inside carried the weight of my time and effort. The gray sofa I bought after 6 months of overtime. The dining set I picked up from a thrift store, then sanded and repainted on weekends. The cramped kitchen where I added a small island I found online at a bargain. Nothing matched, but everything was chosen by me. That apartment wasn't just a place to live. It was proof that I had made it, that even without anyone backing me, I could build a space of my own. Every morning when I stepped onto the slightly cold wooden floor, I felt I truly had a home, something I had never felt growing up in my parents' house. After getting that little apartment in Chicago, I thought my life was finally on track. Work was stabilizing, the shadow of tuition debt was gone, and I believed I had found a safe harbor in love. That person was Ethan. We met at a tech and digital media conference. He was a software engineer, 3 years older than me, with a warm smile and a way of talking that made me feel understood. The first time we had coffee together, Ethan leaned in and asked softly, "I'm guessing you're the type who always has everything prepared, right?" I laughed. "Why do you think that?" "Because you have the look of someone who's weathered storms and still stands tall." Those words touched something deep inside me, a place that longed for someone to see the scars I never showed. From that day on, we started dating. 2 years together, I believed this was the most serious relationship of my life. Ethan wasn't overly romantic, but he patiently listened when I talked about late night shifts, work stress, Even family stories I usually kept hidden. Whenever I was drained, he'd have food ready, play my favorite movies, and say, "You don't have to be strong all the time with me." I believed him. I believed I could lean on him. I had started to imagine a future with him in it. Until one evening, while we were having dinner at our usual spot, Ethan casually dropped a sentence that shattered my world. "Oh, I accepted a job offer in Seattle. I'm moving next month." I looked up, my fork still holding a strand of pasta. "Seattle?" Never said anything to me. He shrugged as if it wasn't a big deal. "Yeah, I knew you'd be shocked. But this opportunity is too good to pass up." I tried to keep my voice steady. "I understand it's a great opportunity. But, don't you think we should have talked about it? We've been together for 2 years." Ethan looked at me with mild surprise, as if he hadn't realized he had ended us. "I didn't think my decision would affect you that much." That sentence, so gentle yet so cold, cut through me. 2 years of love, all the promises of a shared future, meant less to him than a new job. I left the restaurant that night, the wind off Lake Michigan stinging my face, my heart hollow. The apartment I was once proud of now echoed with silence. Every corner reminded me of Ethan. The mug he used for coffee, the jacket still draped over the chair, even the faint scent of his cologne on my pillow. I wanted to cry, but no tears came. The emptiness dragged me back to childhood, when the things I longed for were always overlooked. In the days after, I forced myself to stay composed at work. I kept planning campaigns, meeting clients, smiling at coworkers. But inside, I felt like a cracked door, one strong gust away from collapsing. One night, I called my mother, hoping for comfort. But as soon as I told her Ethan had left for Seattle, she only replied, "Well, maybe that's for the best. You still have your apartment, a steady job. You're strong, Caroline." "But Mom," I hesitated, "I feel so empty." "You'll get through it. Meanwhile, your sister just failed her art class again, so I need to be there for her." I lowered the phone, that familiar ache washing over me. I was never allowed to be weak. In my family's eyes, I was the strong eldest daughter. My heartbreak mattered less than Madeline's failed class. Those days I began to wonder, maybe both love and family only ever saw me as the one who endures. A walking wall that needed no protection. I had tried to prove otherwise, but perhaps my silence all those years convinced them I had no need for care. Another evening, my best friend Rachel dropped by. Seeing me fumbling in the messy kitchen, she placed a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to pretend you're fine with me." I broke down. Tears poured out, tangled with sobs. I told her everything. About Ethan, the call with my mother, the feeling of being overlooked my whole life. Rachel quietly held me, letting me cry like a child. When my sobs subsided, she whispered, "You don't have to be strong all the time. You deserve love, support, not to be treated as someone else's shadow." Her words left me still. I had waited my whole life to hear that, but it didn't come from my parents or my partner. It came from a friend. I sat for a long time after Rachel left. The apartment was silent, but in my heart grew a resolve. If the world insisted I be strong, then this time I would choose strength for myself, not to shoulder everyone else's neglect. After the shock with Ethan, I thought I would have time to heal in peace, to enjoy the home I had worked so hard for. But the storm came again, this time from the most familiar place. My family. At first it was small things. My sister came over and borrowed a dress for a party. I agreed, thinking it was normal between sisters. But the dress never came back. The next week, she showed up in my leather jacket from the closet. When I reminded her, she laughed it off. "I was just trying it on, I was going to give it back." But the jacket disappeared too, just like the dress. I started feeling uneasy but held back. I told myself maybe I was overreacting, that a few things weren't worth a fight. Then one evening I came home from work and froze. In my apartment, music blared, lights flashed, and the smell of wine filled the air. More than 10 strangers lounged in my living room, laughing and raising glasses. My sister stayed in the center, draped in the fur shawl I kept in the closet, holding her glass like a queen. "Madeline," I snapped, making the room fall silent. "This is my home. What are you doing?" She flinched but quickly regained her calm. "It's just a little party. My friend's place was too small and yours is spacious." I looked around, red wine stains blotched the rug I had worked weeks of overtime to afford, lipstick smeared the gray sofa. Rage shook me, but the guests glared at me like I was the intruder. After I kicked everyone out, the apartment looked like a battlefield. I turned to my sister, trying to stay calm. You can't do this. This is my private space. You have to respect it. She shouted back, you're so selfish. I just wanted to shine for once. What's wrong with that? You always have everything. A job, your own place, and I have nothing. I choked on her words. All those years of grinding work reduced to selfishness in her eyes. That night I called my parents, hoping they'd understand. But their response chilled me. You're overreacting. My mother scolded. Madeline only wanted to have fun. As her older sister, you should be more generous. My father added, you're too harsh, Caroline. I hung up, sinking into the chair, heart crushed. Then I remembered the necklace from my grandmother, the only keepsake I had after she passed, stored in a small wooden box. My gut told me to check. I rushed to the bedroom, opened the drawer, empty. The box was there, but the necklace was gone. I called my sister immediately. You took Grandma's necklace, didn't you? On the other end, she hesitated before bursting into tears. I wanted to wear it to the party. I wanted people to admire me. I was going to give it back. I forced my voice firm. That necklace was Grandma's. It's not something for you to show off. The crying grew louder, and then my mother grabbed the phone. You're being too harsh. Madeline just wants to feel special for once. Why can't you have some sympathy for her? I couldn't believe my ears. The one thing I considered sacred was brushed aside simply because it was in the hands of the child who needs protecting. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the wrecked apartment, the missing items, the stains not yet cleaned, feeling like I was sinking. I asked myself, in my family's eyes, can everything of mine be taken as long as it pleases her? All my effort, my hard work, my pride, were they just extras always ready to be sacrificed for someone else? The next morning I tried one last time to talk. I asked my sister to meet at a cafe near my place. She arrived, still wearing that innocent look, eyes red. I set my cup down and looked straight at her. You need to understand something. This apartment is my private space. Grandma's necklace is an irreplaceable keepsake. I can't let you keep hurting me like this. She bit her lip, then whispered, I'm sorry, but you always have everything and I never get any attention. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. No one has everything, Madeline. I worked myself to the bone for what I have today. And every time you stumble, Mom and Dad rush to catch you. Think about it. Who is that fair to? She went quiet, tears still on her face. I knew this conversation wouldn't change anything. Because that very evening my mother called again, scolding. Don't be so strict. Your sister is fragile. You need to give way to her. I sat in my apartment holding the empty wooden box in my hands. Helplessness seeped into every cell. I had hoped that at least once my parents would protect me. But as always, they chose their little princess. And once again I was pushed aside, cast as the selfish one in my own story. After Grandma's necklace went missing, I knew I couldn't go on living in a violated space. The apartment that once felt like a refuge now only held unease. Every night I drifted in and out of sleep, afraid my sister would sneak in again, afraid I'd lose another keepsake, afraid years of effort would keep being treated like they meant nothing. Rachel was the first to see how depleted I was. One evening, while I sat blankly by the window, she set down a cup of tea and said firmly, You can't stay here anymore. This isn't safe for you. I gave a strained smile. But where would I go? I poured so much into this place. Rachel gripped my hand. Sometimes safety matters more than anything. If your family won't give you peace, you have to create it yourself. A few days later, I told everything to my therapist, Dr. Lewis. He listened carefully, then nodded. What you're feeling is completely valid. Your family hasn't respected your boundaries. If you want change, you'll need to re-establish those boundaries yourself, even with very concrete steps. His words felt like a key to a door I'd been too afraid to push. That night, I sat in the apartment, pulled out pen and paper, and wrote down everything I needed to do. And for the first time in my life, I made a plan to disappear. I started looking for a place in the Wicker Park neighborhood, far from my family's usual orbit. The streets full of artists and small cafes gave me a sense of freedom. I pretended to be picking up extra shifts, but spent entire afternoons viewing apartments. When I stepped into a fourth-floor unit with creaking wooden floors and windows opening onto a courtyard with an old maple, my heart felt lighter. It was smaller than my old place, but it held a rare stillness. I'll take it, I said to the landlord, my voice trembling. She smiled and nodded. I like tenants who are kind and quiet like you. When I signed the lease, my hand shook just like it had the day I bought my first apartment. But this time it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like release. Next, I opened a new bank account at a different bank. I moved half my savings there, a way to protect myself from any kind of control. I changed every password. Email, social media, even online shopping. I didn't want anyone tracing me. As for my things, I chose to move quietly. Each day, I packed a few small items into a box, loaded them into Rachel's car and drove them to Wicker Park. I took only what truly mattered. A few old books, the chair my grandmother used to sit in, and some well-worn kitchen tools. The rest, from the sofa and dining table to the bed, I left behind as if abandoning the memories that had been trespassed. The most important item was the heirloom necklace. After getting it back from my sister, I knew I couldn't leave it in any apartment again. One morning, I brought it to the bank and placed it in a safe deposit box. When the employee shut the heavy steel door, my chest eased. At least one part of my grandmother's memory was protected, no longer a prop for someone's showing off. Throughout the 6-week transition, I kept my routine with my family. I answered calls briefly, used work as an excuse to avoid Sunday dinners. If my mother asked, I said I was tired. If my father called, I told him I was doing extra shifts. My sister kept sending the same messages. Lend me some money. Are you free? Can I stop by? I replied curtly and revealed nothing about my new place. At night, I sat in the Wicker Park apartment arranging small things. I hung a few plants by the window, bought new ocean blue bedding, and set a small wooden desk for writing. Every item was carefully chosen, free of memories of being taken. The space was simple but full of relief. I inhaled deeply, the scent of old wood blending with the autumn breeze drifting in, and felt like I finally had a place that truly belonged to me. Rachel often came to help me set things up. She laughed. It's like you're rebuilding your entire life, one brick at a time. That's right. This time it's mine. At the next week's session, Dr. Lewis looked at me and said, "You've done something very brave. Not everyone has the courage to step out of their family's grip on their own." Hearing that, my eyes stung. For so long, I'd been forced to be strong because no one stood beside me, but this time the strength came from my own choice. I chose to leave to find peace. Whenever I looked back at my old apartment, I no longer felt pride, only that it was a gilded cage, beautiful but suffocating. Wicker Park, with its cracked floors and the sound of the train drifting through the window, became my real home. There, I didn't have to guard every object from my sister's hands or argue with my parents about fairness. A text from my mother came on a Tuesday morning. Emergency family dinner. 6 p.m. Thursday. No absences. I knew exactly what was coming. For the past 2 weeks, my sister had bombarded me with messages. Sometimes blaming, sometimes begging. One moment, "You're so selfish. You have everything and I have nothing." The next, "I don't have a place to stay. Let me stay with you for a while." I hadn't responded. So now the whole family had decided to drag me into a so-called intervention. That evening, I drove to my parents' house in the suburbs of Springfield. The house looked the same as ever. Trimmed lawn, windows glowing warm yellow. Stood at the door for a few seconds, took a deep breath, then rang the bell. My mother opened the door, her face forcing a cheerful expression. "Here, good. Come in. Everyone's waiting." Inside, my father sat in his armchair, folding his newspaper aside, his eyes tense. My sister sat on the sofa, head down, hands twisting together, playing the victim. The air was heavy. We ate in silence for 15 minutes. My mother kept piling food onto my plate, pretending to be busy. I knew she was rehearsing her opening line. Then my father cleared his throat, a familiar signal before every serious negotiation. "Caroline, your sister, has been having a tough time lately," he said solemnly, as if announcing a major event. "She just lost her job and her landlord is being unfair, raising the rent for no reason. Completely unreasonable." My mother cut in, voice high. How could she possibly manage? I set my fork down, saying nothing. My father continued. "We've discussed it. The best solution is for your sister to move in with you for a while. Family has to help one another." My mother immediately added, honey sweet but imposing, "And don't worry. We've already spoken with your building's management. They agreed to add Madeline's name to your lease." She smiled stiffly, eyes waiting for my agreement. My father folded his arms like the decision was final. My sister glanced up, a glint of barely hidden satisfaction in her eyes. I spoke slowly. So, you've decided everything on your own, haven't you? My father nodded. Yes. It's the most reasonable thing to do. I took a deep breath and felt a strange calm spread through me. There's something you should know. I moved out of that apartment 6 weeks ago. The spoon slipped from my mother's hand and clinked against the plate. My father frowned. What did you say? I moved out 6 weeks ago. That building is an empty unit now. If you've been discussing it with management, you've only been talking about a place no one lives in anymore. Silence fell, heavy and dense. My mother's face went pale, her voice trembled. Where have you been all this time? I answered briefly. Somewhere I feel safe. My sister stared at me, mouth agape. The triumphant smile vanished, replaced by shock. How could you keep this from the family? My father slammed his hand on the table, his voice sharp. Caroline, what are you doing? Moving out without telling anyone, hiding your address? This is a betrayal of the family. I kept my tone even. I'm not betraying anyone. I've learned to protect myself because clearly no one else would do it for me. My mother clutched her chest, breathing hard. You can't treat family like strangers. Families don't keep secrets. Real families respect boundaries. They don't erase them. My sister's eyes reddened, tears streaming down. I just wanted to shine for once. Why are you always so selfish? I replied softly but firmly. You don't need to take from me to shine. But you chose to, and I can't let it continue. My parents had no words left to impose. The script they prepared had collapsed. And I, who once bowed my head and endured, now sat upright, facing everything. The air in the living room felt thick, as if the whole house had its windows sealed. I looked at the 3 people in front of me and for the first time felt no fear. I placed my hands on the table, my voice calm but clear. If you really want to understand why I had to leave, I'll tell you everything. My father's eyes narrowed, my mother twisted her napkin anxiously, and my sister kept her head down. I drew a deep breath and began. You didn't just borrow things and not return them. You stole Grandma's necklace, the most precious keepsake I have. You brought strangers into my apartment, drank wine, stained my things, and left a mess. And the worst part, you opened my drawer and read my journal. What I wrote to face my private pain, you turned into a spectacle of curiosity. My mother rushed in, voice choking. But she's young, she's lost. Can't you be more generous? I looked straight at her. I've been generous my whole life. I stayed silent when I was forgotten, compared, forced to give everything up for her. But today I won't swallow it anymore. My father growled. You're making a big deal out of this. Heat rose in my chest. Forgiveness doesn't mean letting people keep hurting you. I'm not anyone's rescue wallet anymore. I have the right to make decisions about my own life. I saw my father's eyes flicker. My mother still cried and my sister burst out. Do you hate me that much? No, I don't. But I won't let you keep walking over me in the name of sisterhood. If you want to grow up, you have to learn to take responsibility for yourself. I used to tremble facing their anger, but in that moment I remained steady. I've said all I need to say. From now on, I set boundaries. Anyone who wants a place in my life must respect them. If not, I'll step back. I picked up my bag. My father started to speak, then fell silent. My mother's eyes were wet, and my sister hunched her shoulders, sobbing. That was the moment I knew that, for the first time in my life, I had stood up to my family. After the night I declared my boundaries, my phone turned into a battlefield. By morning, there were nearly a dozen messages from my mother. I couldn't sleep all night. The family can't fall apart like this. I cried so hard my eyes are swollen. By noon, my father sent short, clipped lines. This behavior is disrespectful. You're destroying the family. By evening, my sister called non-stop, sometimes sobbing. I'm sorry, I'll change. Sometimes furious. You always think you're above everyone, but you're the coldest and most selfish of all. I looked at all of it and didn't reply right away. I practiced breathing deeply and reminded myself of what I had said. Lewis had advised me, you don't need to respond immediately. You have the right to choose when and how to reply. I set a rule. If my parents wanted to meet, it would only be in neutral places. I no longer let them into my new apartment, no longer gave my sister a chance to rummage or demand. My mother begged in texts, "Come home for dinner, I'll cook your favorite." I answered, "I'll only meet at the cafe near my office." At first they were angry, accusing me of distancing myself. But gradually the tone changed during meetings in neutral spaces. One afternoon my father sat across from me, sighed after a long pause and said quietly, "Maybe we favored her too much. I kept thinking you were strong and didn't need care." My mother sat beside him, eyes red, fingers twisting a tissue. "I didn't realize that every time I defended your sister I was hurting you." Hearing that, I felt both pain and relief. Pain because it took so many years to hear an admission. Relief because at least I was no longer talking to myself. Meanwhile, my sister began to pay the price for her old habits. After her friends cut her off for exploiting their money and belongings, she was jobless with no one left to defend her. One night, I received an unfamiliar text. "I've started therapy. The doctor says I have to face what I've done. I'm not ready to apologize yet, but I want you to know I'm trying." I stared at the screen for a long time, then replied, "If you're truly trying, I wish you luck." The rest of my life finally began to sprout. In Wicker Park, I got to know my neighbors. Zoe, a cheerful kindergarten teacher, and Mark, the painter on the third floor who often invited me to his studio. We hosted small evenings. Pizza, music, sharing books. For the first time, I felt I had a real community. One that didn't demand I sacrifice myself to be accepted. Work moved forward too. After I finished a digital media campaign for a fashion brand, the director called me into his office. He set a folder on the table and smiled. "Caroline, we'd like to promote you to project manager." Inside, I knew this wasn't only about competence, but also about my newly learned confidence. Daring to set boundaries and say no. That evening, I walked back to my small place in Wicker Park. Warm light spilling from the window, the maple tree rustling outside. I realized I was smiling, not to mask pain, but a genuine smile from someone who stood up after years of being overlooked. And even though my family still sent messages of blame or lament, I no longer trembled. I knew I had the right to choose and to protect my life. 6 months after that confrontation, I sat in a small cafe in downtown Chicago, where golden light pooled on the wooden tables and the smell of freshly roasted coffee filled the air. It was the spot I chose for our first meeting after months of distance. I arrived early, ordered a latte, and tried to steady my heartbeat. The door opened. My parents walked in, looking older than the last time I saw them. My father no longer walked as firmly. His shoulders dipped a little. My mother wore a beige cardigan, dark circles under her eyes, but something softer in her gaze. They looked around, saw me, and slowly made their way to the table. "Caroline." My mother's voice quivered. "You look healthier." "I'm okay." I answered shortly and gestured for them to sit. The first moments were heavy. No one knew how to begin. A spoon clinked against a cup at the next table, then melted into the jazz humming in the background. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "I've wanted to say this for a long time. We were wrong." I looked up and met his eyes. The imposing air was gone. Only fatigue and regret remained. "Wrong? For making you carry too much. I kept thinking you were strong and didn't need help. I realized that was our excuse to favor your sister." My mother dabbed her eyes, her voice breaking. "I was blind. I thought protecting your sister was my duty and forgot that you needed love too." I gripped my latte, emotions rising and tangling. I'd waited years to hear an acknowledgement. Hearing it now felt both light and aching. I nodded slowly. "I don't expect everything to change overnight. But at least, I need the truth to be called by its name." We sat a while longer, talking about small things. The backyard garden, a new recipe my mother tried, a movie my father had watched. The conversation wasn't perfect, but it wasn't tense. As we got up, my mother took my hand. "If you'll allow it, we'll try to make it right." I answered, gentle but clear. "That will take time." That afternoon, back in Wicker Park, a new message flashed on my phone. The sender's name made me stop. "Madeline. I'm learning to take responsibility. My therapist says when I'm ready, I have to apologize to you. I'm not ready yet, but I want you to know I'm trying." I didn't rush to reply. I let the screen glow in my hand, a smile slowly rising. Not because every wound had healed, but because I knew I had broken the old cycle. Being the one expected to carry, to endure, to stay quiet. I had chosen a different path. One where I'm allowed to protect myself and smile when I think about the future. Sunset spread over the neighborhood, spilling through my apartment window. I opened the door and stepped inside, feeling more clearly than ever. This is my home, and it proves I've begun a new chapter. From the girl always placed outside the circle of love to the woman who dared to say, enough, and raise a fence for herself. No change is easy, especially with family, but sometimes real love begins with learning to love yourself. What about you? Have you ever been overlooked, forced to give in, or made to carry others just because they were more fragile? Will you keep staying silent, or dare to stand up the way I did? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might help someone find their courage. And if you want more everyday stories filled with strength, about family, wounds, and rebirth, remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. I'll share more journeys ahead, stories of family where perhaps you'll recognize a part of yourself.